So the three games that we have today. So we have game four of this PT Finals match. We have a Pro Tour Aether Revolt match that I sent you, and then I think let's just do the one of the top four games.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
we'll just do one game from each match. One thing I noticed while watching these matches is that the mulligan rule was so bad. Like I just watched so many of your features where you would just be like, "All right, I'm on five." Like it was just so horrible. In this match, there were just like games two and three were just total washes.
Oh yeah. Well, the Miracle deck especially mulliganed a lot, but it actually mulliganed well. I
Yeah,
think it's
because you just peel. Yeah.
yeah. So certainly, like London Mulligan rule would be insane for that deck
Yeah.
if it existed. You
Uh,
just put all your crappy overcosted cards back in your deck and
yeah.
shuffle them in with Evolving Wilds or whatever.
Also, your enablers were so good. Like it's just such a sick Think Twice deck. Like Think Twice is so crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
And
what
one of
else?
the things is the
Oh, yeah.
mana in that format was so bad that just being able to be like a
Yeah.
27 land deck that's just two
Yeah,
colors
that
with
mana
a
was
bunch of cantrips.
unreal. I looked at that, I
Yeah.
laughed so hard. Like every mana deck, every deck's mana was just incredibly bad.
Oh, some of the like my deck is just not greedy with mana at all, but I got a lot of wins. People didn't realize that in some ways, like I was a land destruction deck because Tameo just locks their lands down,
Yeah,
and
that's
like
true.
Feeling of Dread taps the mana creatures,
Yeah,
and they
and
don't cast anything.
yeah, and like those turns are so important because you're bound to hit like a miracle. So if you just like tap down their dork for a turn or two, you're gonna kill it eventually.
Yeah, yeah. It's just all about buying time, right? And
Yeah,
eventually, you get to do something
exactly.
way over the top of what they're doing.
Let me just.
I don't want to. I don't want to tell anybody that it was like a broken deck or anything. But history has viewed it as like an unplayably horrible deck, and it wasn't that either. It was a very average deck. Is
Yeah, no, it's
is
kind
my
of
view.
sick.
It
Definitely
was
watching these games was really cool. Like, there's nothing like. I mean, it's also pretty dumb, but
oh yeah,
like,
it's just very different than
yeah,
normal Magic kind of, which is
yeah, it's like a prison deck, kind of.
yeah, it's a little bit. It is a little prisony, but it's also like sort of a ramp deck in some ways. You're ramping in a different way.
Yeah, that's true. Um, so let's just go over the deck list really quick. So this is your finals match. You're playing your deck. Do you want to give a little introduction to it and what it's trying to do?
Sure. So I mean, it's really a control deck, right? In
Hmm.
the format, the format was Avacyn restored. Well, Innistrad block, which included Avacyn restored block constructed. So there were a bunch of things that didn't exist in that format. For example, like 4 mana sweepers.
Oh, that's why
Uh,
their mana was horrible. I was like, how did this
yeah,
happen?
the mana's bad, and also that block constructed format there were some banned cards, namely Lingering Souls was banned
Oh,
and Intangible Virtue because in the early days, like for block constructed, back when there were tournaments like that, it was a very open format because besides like some moto leagues, there weren't really any tournaments leading up to the Pro Tour. So it was kind of, a really deck builder's paradise in that there's nothing. You have to figure out what you think the metagame is, come up with decks because nobody else has done the work for you.
yeah, definitely looking at the deck list, there was a bunch of weird stuff going on. There was a bunch of just random decks.
Yeah, I mean, these are the top 8 decks too,
Yeah,
right?
no,
You're not
exactly.
looking at actual random decks. Some of the decks I faced in the tournament were like really bad, like embarrassingly so. And that's coming from someone who played this deck, which was pretty bad. But
That's valid. Yeah.
but
Did you?
yeah, so the point with this deck is basically you want to buy time and you want to, you know, use the miracle mechanic to get cheap spells. Like since there's no cheap sweeper, you get Terminus and Devastation Tide that are cheap if you draw them right for
Yeah.
your turn. Temporal Mastery is kind of like an explorer, but also later in the game though it lets you do some sick stuff with especially with Tameo when you get multiple turns with Tameo and
You
you
can
can
draw a
kind of
bunch of cards, whatever.
yeah, you draw a bunch of cards and you can kind of combo off in
Yeah.
some ways.
But it is mostly an explorer, at least from watching these games. Like a lot of times
Yeah,
you're just like, oh, temporal, but it's good.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, again, it's not like Explorer where you also get another chance to
yeah,
miracle something.
yeah, it's a
And then
wash.
there's four Thought Scour, four Think Twice. Obviously, Thought Scour is the cheapest one, so you can miracle something more expensive. But Think Twice flashes back, so you get a lot of chances. Feeling of Dread is kind of like a worse moments piece, other than the fact that it synergizes with Tameo.
Mm.
Just kind of are fogging people, and it's sweet that the synergy with Thought Scour and Think Twice, Feeling of Dread,
Yeah,
you
definitely.
can you target yourself and you can hit things that are sweet to cast.
And Feeling of Dread is so surprisingly good in this deck. Like you don't have any hard card advantage, so it looks a little weird. Where like you're not. You're just building towards more draw steps because once you hit your terminus, it doesn't matter what you're feeling of dreading.
Yeah, like Tameo is kind of a draw spell. Sometimes
That's true.
sometimes you play it and just draw a few cards, especially with feeling of dread.
Yep.
And you can often set that up. It seems like a lot of mana, but Temporal Mastery does often let you, set that sort of thing up. Entreat the Angels your main game plan winner. Like sometimes you hardcast to just making 2 Angels for 7 mana. Nowadays, we're spoiled. That's not good enough. But
yeah, now you're Entreat the Angels as a land.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but back then it was okay. It obviously was a little inefficient, but and then when you miracle one, it was just a broken card. A lot of the decks in the top 8 couldn't actually beat it.
So looking,
Tide probably the worst card in the deck.
Yeah, that makes sense. So looking at Go Dennis's deck, he was playing the Bant Flash Auras deck, kind of, but it's sort of middling in that it has increasing savagery and like Wolfear, so it's a little bit more mid-rangey and just like big, beefy threats.
Yeah, it's more of a Boggles deck than a Flash deck, really. It's
oh yeah, I meant to say
Stalker, Geist-Seeing Draft, and then the idea is you scoot that up with increasing savagery, Silverheart, and Spectral Flight. Wolfear Silverheart was one of the marquee cards of this block format. There's a lot of Silverheart mirrors, and you kind of want to, my deck tried to go over the top in a different way, but a lot of people did different things with Silverheart. This was one of the ways to beat the like Naya Silverheart decks that were pretty standard, and making a huge invisible stalker, or after sideboard Tree of Redemption, you can basically kind of you exchange your life total with its toughness. Well, when you boost it up, right, you're gaining life every time you do that interaction. It's very, very hard to kill you.
That's weird. Yeah.
It was a big thing. I know one team like splashed the Nephalia Drown Yard in their sideboard because of Tree of Redemption mirrors that nobody could actually kill each other with damage. So they would try and mill each other out using like abundant growth and stuff.
Where was this PT?
It was in Barcelona.
Nice.
So.
All right, let's hop in the game. So your opening hand is 5 lands, Terminus, Feeling of Dread. Not a great hand, but you kept it.
Yeah, it's almost perfect actually.
Okay.
So with the Miracle deck, you really just a hand of like 7 lands is not actually perfect, but it was great at the time.
So you would just Snapcube 7 in the dark? 7 lands.
Okay, well, again, we've talked about how the mulligans back then were way
horrifying.
Worse,
right?
Yeah. Under London mulligan, sure, this hand is not great.
Because you just bid your miracle spells, but
yeah, we weren't even talking Vancouver mulligan here, right? This was before that.
No, the games were so horrible. Holy crap, it's so bad.
So like, if Terminus here was like a Think Twice or a Thought Scour, this would basically be a perfect hand.
Yeah, that's true.
Having 2 blue sources, 2 white sources, a Feeling of Dread to buy yourself some time. That's all you wanted to do. You just want to buy time because eventually what you do is more powerful than what your opponent does.
Yeah, and with 16 miracle spells, you're like kind of running above average to only have 1 in your hand.
Right. Yeah. So it's not bad.
Yeah.
And Terminus is the best one because it's pretty reasonable to hardcast.
Also, I'm gonna start by playing these at 1.5 speed, but if it's going too fast, we can slow it down.
That's fine. So I led with planes. I didn't want to fetch planes with Evolving Wilds because you want to have more blue sources later. You only really want 2 white sources.
Yeah, and your hand is 3 planes.
And you always want to have white on turn 1 in case you draw a Terminus so you can cast it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Evolving Wilds, one of the best lands in the format, seemingly.
Yeah, your mind is blown. Cavern of Souls is a pretty good land.
Yeah,
too.
Cavern of Souls is good.
See?
Okay, you're a god.
That's how you do it.
How does he do it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then now we get the Evolving Wilds.
Wow, so clean. Okay.
So, yeah, that's
a hand.
Obviously, that's when you get to do Terminus there, it's pretty busted. It's more busted when there's more resources in play for your opponent. But
yeah, but we take those, especially because like as the game goes longer, you're just favored. You just need to beat his early game. So trading your Terminus for an elf is fantastic for you.
Right, and there's some consideration to not casting Terminus sometimes because you want to have a sweeper later. But here I already have the Terminus in hand, so it's a pretty easy decision to just miracle it. Definitely playing this deck, I had to prepare ahead of time my like physical stuff. If you're playing this online, it's easy, but in real life, you cannot just. My instinctive thing is to draw a card, put it in my hand, right?
Yeah,
but you really cannot do that with this deck.
It's very punishing to that.
And you also need to make a snap decision whether you're going to cast the card or not. So you
Yeah.
usually have to know ahead of time whether you're going to cast something.
Yeah, because you just give so much. You give so much information if you hesitate.
So there, we just got a temporal mastery, a little explore.
Yep.
I play the second planes in case I draw entreat.
Nice.
Which I didn't, but I have a think twice and a feeling of dread. So this is just basically how we drew it up.
Yeah, you just have the nuts.
Just need a Tameo kind of, and then we're all set. Not under much pressure. I'm at 16 life, lots of time.
Oh yeah, go Dennis with the lands in front. You'd love to see that.
Yeah, not allowed anymore.
Yep.
Magic has changed really.
Oh, it's so different. Even watching like a bunch of like 2014 features to like prepare for this, I was like, wow, it's just so different.
Yeah, that's what it's like being all washed up,
Yeah. Especially just, it's so nice to see paper Magic. Like just even to watch old features during the coronavirus, I'm like, damn, it's so nostalgic.
Yeah, like I'm enjoying just looking at my lands.
Oh, your lands are nice because your deck's just got 23 basic lands in it. We ain't got no fucking dual lands. We bringing out the beta basics,
Oh yeah, I borrowed them from my friend David Kaplan, who's just like, yeah, I was using whatever land box basics because I didn't have any money.
Yeah.
And he's like, look, just use my nice lands.
Oh yeah. They are nice lands. Also, shout out to you using Ultra Pro sleeves. That is illegal. That's wild. Illegal as in horrible. I watched old features too where people were just using the glossy dragon shields. I like that. Classics.
So here I decide just a feeling of dread, because there's no hurry to play my think twice. I want to here. I really just at the point where if I draw an entreat, I'm gonna win the game, right?
Yeah. But I guess it's kind of interesting though, like with double think twice and the thought scour, since you have so many draws, maybe it's worth it to draw first. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well now I do in case I do draw.
Yep.
The entreat, I could at least make one thing, and I flash back.
That's a common sequence I saw a lot while watching. Is you would just draw and then do your thing always, of course.
Yeah. Because if I hit, then I hit, and if I don't, I have the backup land. That's kind of it. It's relatively straightforward here. One interesting story, some interesting stories, I guess, outside of just the match is that, so back then, winning the Pro Tour didn't give you automatic platinum, which was like a pro status for the people that are way past that. So I, however, had enough pro points from just making top 8 of the tournament that I got the highest pro status. So here, however, Godenis was not platinum, but if he won, he would actually get enough pro points to get platinum.
So this match was a really big deal for him.
Yeah. One interesting thing also is that he asked for a concession before this match.
Oh.
Here's my hard cast Terminus. I don't know if I would have even been allowed to concede based off of what things are. I mean, it would be hard for them to stop me, doing whatever stuff, but obviously I laughed as politely at him as I could.
As you should. Okay, so here we're main phasing Think Twice because you have more draws and you want to hit your lands.
And I want to find a land. I found a temporal mastery, which of course looks awkward, but there's basically making land drops was really important with this deck.
Yeah. So. And here you even go so far as to flash it back.
Yeah. And I draw an entreat, so I look really, really stupid.
So do you think? I think that definitely cycling the first one is correct. Do you think that cycling the second one is maybe suspect? Because you don't have enough. Like if you're flashing back the Think Twice, you go down to one land, and then you can't do anything. But if you play the Thought Scour as your spell, you can still hit.
Well, I can hit. What can I hit?
Oh, true, because you're stuck on white, so you can only hit Terminus.
I can hit Terminus or Entreat, and remember, I'd have to do it on Godenis's turn.
Yeah, that's bad.
Because I've already drawn too many cards, right? So here I'm just digging for land drops.
Yeah, that makes sense.
As it turns out, I believe this game I end up finding too many lands as the game eventually ends. But it's since we do go to 5 games, but so of course those cards are better to miracle, but hitting the land drops, getting to a large amount of mana is where all the cards start to scale. And since my hand had a bunch of cantrips already, and I've still that other Think Twice in the graveyard, cantrips aren't like the limiting resource here. Lands are. So, also, this is me very early in my Magic career, and I was definitely not, anywhere near as good as I became later at my peak. Is also not now, but
Do you think that there's like a do you think that there was a big difference from you here to your peak, and then from your peak to like just not having played as much in the last couple years?
yeah, there's a big difference. Certainly, big difference here to my peak. What's interesting is I don't know if I'm actually like my peak, if it's worse or better than I am now. It's because I think like everybody continually gets better at Magic.
Yeah.
It's like a Red Queen race where I just didn't in the like last while I haven't been improving as much as some other people have, so they've passed me.
That's
So yeah,
definitely true.
I drew a land so I can hardcast as Entreat for a couple of angels.
Yep, then this is kind of a perfect bridge turn where you don't have to blow any of your cantrips. Just kind of like a good stabilizing turn that puts Dennis in a little bit of an awkward spot.
Yeah. So another thing, like my deck here, since it's post board, one of the things it contains it does contain my copies of Geist of Saint Traft for my sideboard. And back then, the way the legend rule worked is if you each had the same legend, they would both die. So my Geist of Saint Traft were boarded in basically just as destroy target Geist of Saint Traft, like seal of destroyed Geist of Saint Traft.
And so someone in chat was asking on that turn where we were discussing the double cantrip. We can go right back to this.
Yeah.
So on this turn, do you think that there's an argument to keeping up a dissipate?
The fact that there's the Cavern of Souls makes dissipate a lot worse here.
In fact, there's a Cavern of Souls. Yeah. So in this deck, what was Cavern normally on?
On Spirit, so basically cast both Geist of Saint Traft and it casts Strangleroot Geist.
Does it cast Wolfia or no?
No, Wolf. I do not believe so.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just not that very useful once they have the.
Yeah, Wolfia wasn't really the scary card like the. But
no, yeah, that makes sense. So this is the Entreat turn.
So yeah, so make a couple angels, and things are okay, but Go Dennis has this increasing savagery to make the Geist bigger.
But he's 2 lands off that now because the abundant growth is not.
Right. Yeah.
That is sort of a looming threat where you can't just let him do that.
Right. And I'm a 10 life where starts to be that Geist plus other pressure is somewhat annoying. But yeah, mainly dissipates in post board is in my deck to be a like counter spell for his counter. Because afterboard he brings a bunch of counter spells, and I have a bunch of big spells that I'd like to protect, especially when you miracle something like an Entreat. It's possible to be able to play a dissipate as well.
Yeah, because your miracles aren't expensive.
Right.
Were other people playing your deck, or did you prepare alone for this?
No, I prepared with basically almost every Canadian person who was qualified for this tournament was invited to test with our squad, and we also worked with Adam Yurchik, who was honorary Canadian at the time. So I believe we had 14 people playing this deck, many of whom shouldn't have. Despite like these matchups where it's hex, you're playing its hexproof. The deck was actually really, really tricky to play, and especially in like control mirrors, you had to do a lot of really weird stuff. And I think a lot of the people playing it, there were a lot of first-time PT goers and so on, and that's one of the reasons we had a very low win percentage.
And so when you're playing a deck like that, where there's a bunch of these unique interactions, are you the type of player who likes to play a bunch of games to learn those interactions, or do you think you're just good at like feeling out those interactions by just intuitively playing the games?
Yeah, I've never been a big play a ton of games with the deck guy. That's not my style. I tend to figure things out more theoretically, and then as things go on, like I jokingly said that I started this tournament 1-3 when constructed was the beginning of the day. So then I was like learning how to play the deck or whatever.
Nice. I feel
but,
that.
but no, actually, this deck I had played a fair bit with though, and also like watched a lot of people play and help them with because I did make this one. Uh, the big innovation kind of being the feeling of dread, which prior to that the deck was just not able to buy enough time that what it needed. It was
Yeah,
not
you need
consistent
another
enough.
good speed bump, especially with
Yeah.
Thought Scour and stuff. It's so good. So here is kind of a crucial moment where your hand you have a lot of good like tempo elements because you have a feeling of dread, a dissipate, and a temporal mastery, and so you decide to actually get aggressive here. So you're sort of turning the game on its head. You know that he's 2 lands off of flashing back the increasing savagery, so you know you can just start attacking here. Basically, what's going on?
Well, I'm about to cast Temporal Mastery is all.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
so I just get a free attack in.
Yeah. But you do continue to attack, as we'll see. But yes, I know you're not casting.
Oh no, I guess not.
All right, well,
Well, I guess I'm not scared of taking 1 damage from a pilgrim. And I do have as you said, I do have the dissipate, and I do have
yep. Because
feeling of dread.
crucially, Wolf, your Silverheart doesn't get caverned. You can might not even dissipate anyways.
Yeah. Whereas, however, this Geist
Quite
does
annoying.
not. So fire off the Thought Scour.
Sure.
Yeah. So I guess attacking there is basically planning to try and turn the corner.
So here you choose not to flashback either Think Twice because you want more.
Yeah, I want more
Yes.
potential miracle hits. I think here
But just attack or
I just passed the turn.
pass. What's the reasoning for pass instead of temporal here?
Well, he's got dissipate in his deck.
Oh, he's got
so-
counters, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just actually not under with just the Geist. I'm not under much pressure because I'm tapping down the Pilgrim here, so he can't get a flashback even with a land on the
Yeah,
increasing
that's
savagery.
crucial. That's crucial.
So he just doesn't have any good attacks. And again, I'm just trying to buy time. While I could attack and play Temporal Mastery, it's a riskier play. So
This is
But
kind of
flashback-
the thing with the deck is that it felt like you were in such a commanding position the entire game, but now you don't really have a way to pull ahead exactly. I mean, you do in your deck, but like you have to peel.
Yeah, I need to find a Tameo or another Entreat. If I find one of those, basically I'll win the game.
Yep.
But yeah, without those, I'm kind of treading water a lot. Especially, at this point I've drawn like 11 lands to my opponent's 5. All right, so I have a Geist of my own, which can be a Geist answer. So I think here, casting this Geist here, I think is a mistake.
Why?
Because I kind of want him to increasing savagery on his Geist.
So, but the issue.
Yeah.
Well, then don't you just die to the rest of the creatures? Or I mean, you are.
I still have the feeling of dread in my graveyard,
Oh, the feeling of January. Sure.
which is why he would want to target the Geist. So then I can tap the other 2. I can chump for a turn or whatever, take 4, and then maybe play the Geist. It's
Yeah, or there's not
Still-
much of a
still-
reason to like make the decision now because you're getting an extra turn with so much mana where you can take a peel and take a look.
exactly, yeah. I mean, my deck does potentially use a lot of mana between cantrips.
Yeah.
Here,
Especially if you're gonna think twice, then like you could have just think twice last turn and delayed having to make that.
well, I think I just drew that thing twice.
You had it last turn, I'm pretty
Okay, well, in that case, yeah, I should probably just have thought twice
sure. Thought
before making
twice.
that exact play.
Exactly. Okay, so here we're attacking.
Yeah, again, I have that feeling of dread.
I wonder if there was no opportunity to attack on a prior turn, right? Because there was that Geist turn and you just die.
There's
Six.
one turn where I held back
Yeah.
against a Geist.
Yep.
And yeah, No, there was unfortunately there was no other real opportunity to attack. I could have, if I knowing my opponent's hand, I could have played the Temporal Master and attack turn earlier.
But it's
And
still the
then
same clock.
if I well, it would not have ended up the same because
Oh,
then
because
I
you're
would
drawing
have
the
drawn the
Geist. Yeah.
Geist. Yeah. But I would have just been pretty screwed against a Dissipate,
Yeah.
which was one of the things my opponent was representing by not getting in for 1 damage with the Pilgrim. It was either a Wolfear or a Dissipate.
I also wonder on those turns where we were talking about how you didn't flashback your Think Twice if you're just supposed to dig towards like Tamio and stuff because you could just hardcast your miracles anyways, but I guess you still thought he could have Dissipate at that point, so
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it's also there's also spots where yeah. So I think here obviously I should crack first before thinking twice. Just thin my deck a little bit. Um,
deck was definitely cool.
yeah, it was a sweet deck. I mean, it's just that's one of the sweet things about Magic is that there's just all sorts of random weird things that are possible.
So
It's
here, yeah, go ahead.
it's very possible I shouldn't have used that Feeling of Dread since it was a non-lethal attack.
Yeah.
That I could have held back.
Or you could have thought twice first, maybe. You're
I,
think
I,
twice
well,
anyways.
I did think twice. Well, I did the flashback think twice first.
Well, you just then you played your last game action was.
Yeah. So yeah, Tamio comes down and decide to draw two. Obviously, a temporal mastery or entreat or feeling of dread. Any of those are kind of just game here.
But so from your perspective though, if they have 2 cards in hand, they don't have dissipate. So like, if you plus here, what's the real threat of attacking with this angel?
Well, I guess it's flashing in a Wolfear or something, and then playing a land. I know neither of their cards are lands,
Oh,
right?
because they have this thing.
Yeah, they have the flash.
You know neither of their cards are lands.
Yeah. So what can they be, right?
Yeah, I forgot about the savagery. You just can't. You have to leave back. Yeah. So yeah, what can they be? Because they can't be dissipate. It can't be anything. So it's likely they just have another Avenger, which they do.
Or ways to make their creatures bigger. Another savagery or something. Especially with knowing they don't have dissipate, because they wouldn't allow this Tamio to resolve.
Yes.
So yeah, Wolfear Silverheart is possible, but because they, after getting their creatures tapped, maybe they wouldn't cast it, but they might have cast it beforehand to force the feeling of dread. So
yeah, so it could be that.
There's almost certainly a wolf in hand, and then possibly some way to enhance a creature.
So, but the issue is that if there's a wolf in hand, don't you just die if you whiff? I guess you're just hoping not to whiff.
No, I can
jump twice. Right? Well, but if he has, or yeah, I guess you don't know he's 2 cards, right? Because his hand happens to be Avenger and into Silverheart, which does kill you on this board, because he can pump the elf. Yeah. But it's like really hard to deduce that it's exactly those two, although those are like 2 of the only cards that it could be. Like it feels, if it's so likely that they have a wolf, then their second card, because it's not a land, is likely. I guess they could have held a land. No, holding land's so bad. Like it kind of feels like you can almost deduce that it has to be wolf plus some pump spell, which does kill you. But you could also just peel off the Tamio anyways. Kind of interesting spot. Like I wonder if there's like a super, if you can like super next level. I think
nowadays I would have thought more about it, and it's possible I would have just tapped the wolf. But there, a lot of how I playing the deck was to try and get more chances to see things.
Yep. For sure. So, in general, when you play Magic, are you like how? I guess how do you go about like tracking all the things in their hand? Are you just constantly every turn trying to like X off things in your head that you know that they can't have and like keeping track of it all, or are you sort of just a more play by intuition type of person, or what is your like?
Yeah, I don't think I'm not very much an intuition player. I think I definitely when I come to a decision point, I kind of backtrack and try and figure out what they have in their hand. I don't think it's makes that much sense crossing it off every turn because then you're just using so much mental energy for points where often it doesn't really matter what's in their hand. But when you come to a decision point where it does matter, like trying to figure out whether the one line or another, for example, like if you've got just Nissa as your play for this turn, right? You're going to just jam your Nissa, even if they have a noxious grasp in hand because you'll just hope that you draw another Nissa. But if you have other options, that can play around noxious grasp better, then it's more interesting to try and figure out if it makes sense for that to be in their hand.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is a really interesting play. So he just doesn't go for lethal here?
Yeah,
Is
it's
this just a mistake, or is this...
I think it's a mistake, yeah. But
Okay.
obviously, I flashback think twice to try and find something. And I thought Scour as well. Yeah, I have Snapcasters as well in my deck here that are also draws that not only are blockers potentially, but
Yeah, somebody said in the chat, Think Twice was the original Uro. All right.
yeah, old school Euro. That's how far power creep has come.
And it was just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, Godanis could have killed me here instead of just killing Tamio.
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of just killing you there instead of not killing you.
Yeah. All right, so I hit a temporal mastery.
Classic Temporal Mastery.
Check my graveyard to make sure that I have basically nothing.
Yeah.
And I take my next draw.
Promptly die.
And
So
yeah.
it's kind of interesting where I feel like kind of there were maybe mistakes on both sides, and that I think I think that one of the main decisions was like that the Feeling of Dread, or is that what it's called? Feeling of Dread?
Yeah, I think two mistakes I made was one was the Feeling of Dread tapping a non-lethal attack because he doesn't have any pump spells, so I could just take that hit. And then the other one was the Tamio, where if I thought more about what his hand could possibly be there, I'd realize that there's a good chance I just die making that Tamio line.
And there's maybe one or two marginal things with the cantrips that are like debatable, and then
yeah, I think knowing like my experience with the deck, and even though it's been a long time, quite a long time,
yeah,
I think I like the cantrips, though. I think also I guess casting the Geistling Trap instead of Think Twice to get more information.
Yeah,
I think that's also an error.
like a minor thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. This is sort of a random. I was just watching through a lot of your features, and this was kind of an interesting game, I thought. So this is you playing against Ken Yukihiro, round 13 of Pro Tour Aether Revolt.
Yeah.
So Ken, really quickly, is playing Black Green Constrictor. His list is pretty clean. Looks good, Got some cards. So you were playing the Smarty Vehicles deck. So do you remember how you came to this deck and what you thought about this deck?
Yeah, well, I mean, I came to this deck with really the help of my team that I was working with at the time, which was face-to-face Channel Fireball, and this is we at least we last minute figured out that this was the best archetype in the format. We did not have the best list of the best archetype because we figured it out so late. One highlight of our deck is these two Spiral Bluff Canals in the sideboard.
Yeah. Oh, this is looking really in your sideboard. Okay.
Oh yeah, we have two main, two in the
No,
sideboard.
dude. That is cursed.
Repeats,
I mean, that's the plan.
Projection, so that we could beat these Marvel decks or whatever, right?
That's just good deck building.
Well, basically, we were like, oh yeah, we can't figure out what other sideboard cards we want. Let's do it this way so that we have more untapped lands. And obviously, that was horrible. People, as the format evolved, people realized that you should just be playing the Planeswalkers, so you can go over the top often of these black-green matchups. Where instead, we kind of still had to go under them a bit.
And so you're saying that you came to this deck last minute, so I feel like you kind of tested with the same team for a long time, generally, like the face-to-face team.
Yeah, the team. Well, face-to-face teams change a lot of what it was over the years, but also the Channel Fireball side was kind of more what was in flux. Like at this point, the Channel Fireball side of the team included Joel Larson, Eric Froelich, Ben Stark, and all the face-to-face side of the team has been pretty consistent. But we also had PV also on our squad, and Mike Sigrist. So though Siggy notably played a different deck than this.
What deck did Siggy play? Do you remember?
He played Felidar Saheeli, just Jeskai Saheeli combo, which I think in this format, like 4-color Saheeli was good, but I don't
Really
think 3-color was.
Yeah, that makes
But
and so one question that I asked Paul that I thought was like really interesting and useful was like, what do you look for in a testing partner? Like what types of things do you work well with, and do you think that people should be trying to do more if they're trying to like break the format or whatever?
Well, I don't know. My experience, I've had a lot of experience with a variety of different teams, with a variety of different people, starting from points where I wasn't known and didn't have resources to like just pick whoever I wanted, to the point where I was better and had a better team and had a lot of power to choose who was on the team, to later where I didn't necessarily have that power, but I had access to top people. And really it kind of if you've ever seen a heist movie like Ocean's 11 or something, there's like the first part of the movie is them putting together the team.
Yeah.
And I think that people don't approach building a Magic team that way when they should more. People just like, oh yeah, this person's a good player, let's grab them, when really you want a demolitions expert, you want someone who can do the security cameras, you want someone who can be the inside man or whatever, right? Obviously in Magic there's different roles. You want some people who are just going to grind a million games. You want some people who are like good at coming up with new ideas for decks. You want some people who are good tuners. You want some people who can like look at all the data and come up with conclusions. You want some people who are like really good players so they can help the other people figure out how to optimize how they're playing these decks and how they're approaching matchups.
So
stuff like that.
So for example, with this deck, like, do you remember? So you said you got to it late. Like, was that someone just like jamming a bunch of games and being like, I can't beat this Mardu deck, or was it someone just being like, yeah, we should be playing this Heart of Kieran card? Or
frankly, our process for that was a mess. It was incredibly unprofessional, and we did a horrible job. Like people have this idea of Magic teams, and sometimes, but it's the exception rather than the rule. I had teams where like everything runs like clockwork, and we're functioning professionally and efficiently and testing through things. Mostly, it's just like a bunch of people decide to wake up whenever they do and go to the conference room and start playing games with whatever decks they want to play. Then somebody says draft, and then a bunch of people start drafting. This deck, like, I think Ben Stark was just playing some Mardu Vehicles deck, and he was winning a bit, and then we made some changes to make it a bit better, and we're just looking at other decks in the format and decided that this deck was pretty good. It was winning a fair bit. It has incredibly powerful engine, right? Thraben Inspector, Toolcraft Exemplar, Scrapheap Scrounger, Heart of Kieran, Unlicensed Disintegration, and Gideon. I think that was one of the things that our list was better than the other lists at the time, that some people did not play the full 4 Gideon allies.
This card is insane.
Yeah, the card, I mean, I don't even know if it's good anymore. 2019, 2020 cards are something else.
The thing with Gideon is just like, it's such a play draw dependent card, and I still think it would be really good like on the play. Like you'll just kill people. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean back then, especially again, you have 4 Heart of Kieran, which makes Gideon even better. You want to have planeswalkers to crew your heart with.
Yeah,
but
super.
also just the way you could sequence things, Gideon was good at play or draw, and I think not everybody had identified that. And at least that was something where we were successful.
Yeah.
In figuring that out.
That makes sense. And so like, just really quickly going back to what you were saying about the teams, is that if it's just kind of this mess where people are just kind of doing their own thing, like, why hasn't that been iterated on? And do you think that it'll be iterated in the future, or now is it like MPL, like no one cares, or like what? It's just kind of wild to me that I have very limited experience playing playing different PTs, but it definitely struck me in a similar way, just looking at different Magic teams and testing teams, where it feels like this mess, and it's weird to me that it hasn't been streamlined. And why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, I think there's a variety of reasons. One interesting thing is I found that like when I was in lower echelons of Magic, that we often had better testing in terms of like the structure. And lower level teams often they also put in a lot more work. They're kind of hungrier, and then when I'm working with a lot of like these Hall of Famers, they're kind of more nonchalant about it.
Yeah.
I think part of it is that the rewards in Magic aren't that high,
That's true.
so that it's not necessarily worth approaching testing like 100% work. Where so people approach it like 50% work, 50% hanging with their friends and having fun.
Yeah.
And because of that, you get all this unprofessionalism, but it's not necessarily a bug. It's a feature that like people spend as much time hanging out at dinner and playing ping pong as they do figuring out what sideboard slots are best for
Yeah.
deck X versus Y. um, Certainly like this PT, we tested a bunch in Prague, where there was a GP the week before, and we had a bunch of Czech members of our team and had some awesome place where we just basically ate a ton of food.
Nice.
But yeah, this deck, I mean, other than the Spire Bluff Canals, not a huge Cultivators Caravan fan either, but the core of the deck is really strong.
Yeah, definitely.
And so we still somehow end up finding out what's good, just because our group has a lot of skill and a lot of experience. So being able to identify what decks are good, even when our process is bad, is still something people can often do by feel rather than by data. And yeah, we came across this, which I think we all did pretty well with it.
Yeah, your deck is like 73 cards good.
Yeah, I think I finished in the top 25 or something in this tournament.
Yep. Really quick.
Yeah, this was my most painful match. I think I felt I was doing pretty well, and I thought I had a chance at top 8 until this match. And then I guess I had one other big one where I lost to Brad Nelson, and that was later in the tournament, also on black green. But before this, I think I'd beat a couple of black green players, but that was definitely the matchup I wanted to avoid the most. I think we didn't have a great plan against it.
Yeah, you just wrote 2 overloaded on those counter spells and Spire Bluff Canals instead of Planeswalkers.
Yeah, we were more scared of
Marvel
getting Healy and Marveled. And
yeah. Okay. So, really quick, thanks for the raid, Gabe, and thanks for the subs, Daniel. Appreciate it. So you have a really, really slow opening. We have 2 tap lands and a Thraben Inspector.
Yeah.
Which kind of unfortunate. I guess you're on the play too.
Yeah, I'm on the play, and I believe I have Gideon in my hand as well, which is one of the best cards in this matchup.
So just talking about like different Magic strategy here from both sides, I feel like each player's like giving off a decent amount of information to how the game is going to be played. So you lead on Tapland, Thraben, so you obviously have a slower hand. And on the other side of the field, Ken plays turn 2 Aether Hub and plays the Snake, implying that he doesn't have a third land. How much? I mean, you're clearly paying attention to these things, but like, how much do you think that these, on average, play into the way that you're early sequencing?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty big. I mean, Ken could have another land, right? But the only other lands that really make sense for him to have are tap lands or other Aether Hubs.
Yeah, or a tune, because he wanted to play tap land to hub Snake.
Yeah, well, a tune's also a tap land, right? Basically.
Yeah.
Whereas, for me, it seems clear that I might not have other lands in my hand too if I only had these tap lands. But I certainly don't have that many early plays, right? Which makes you think that I have some more powerful things going on. Like I feel it does telegraph the Gideon a bit.
I agree.
And again, yeah, here obviously Winding Constrictor is a hugely scary card. Yeah, as it turns out, what Ken does have is the Attune.
Yep. Someone asked, why were you playing Shock over Fatal Push in this deck?
Well, a lot of it I think was to do with the mana base. It was much more a red-white deck than a black-white deck.
Yeah, you're mostly splashing for Disintegration.
Yeah, and again, like the metagame we expected was not necessarily going to be all creature decks. Shock again against the Saheeli combo is a lot better. We don't have a way to really turn on Fatal Push besides sacking clues.
Yeah.
So you couldn't kill Felidar Sovereign with it, whereas you could break up the combo because Saheeli does go to 1 loyalty. and then you shock it.
But this is a minor question, but like on this turn, like how? So Ken, for example, just to go back a little bit, maybe
Yeah, you
I'm
play
just
the forest first, right?
he plays a forest first. He also like hovers the forest a lot, which I feel like is like I like whenever I try to play, I always try. Are you someone who tries to like think through your turn and like make action, action, action at the same pace, and then to like knock off any formation, or do you not really take too much stock in that type of stuff?
Yeah, I would. For instance, I think probably wouldn't play the forest there, and I certainly would like. I'd figure out my whole turn before I do anything.
Yeah,
I'd be like thinking, thinking, thinking. You know, play
a tune swamp.
a
Yeah,
tune, play swamp. You know, or if I'm deciding to play the forest, then just forest a tune.
yeah. It just kind of bothered me. I don't know. So this, must be a Gideon turn.
Yeah, it's definitely Gideon turn. Of course, I'm a little unhappy that there's a second constrictor that I can't
Yep.
go with.
And from Ken's perspective, he knows you probably have Gideon, so it feels good that he at least gets to snake.
Yeah.
Oh, this play was so weird too. Hated this play. It's interesting.
Yeah, my recollection from this match was that I had been somewhat unimpressed by how he played it, but
Yeah, so here, for example, I would have just played the ballista for 3 and then attack, or played the ballista for x equals 2, putting 3 counters on, and then attacked, so that if you double, you just get to ping it twice instead of having to blow your push.
yeah, and if I don't block, he goes like kills the
Yeah,
Gideon.
it's great. So you're forced into like a block, and you're probably forcing the double, right? Because you just want to get the counters with the ballista, but it's just so much more profitable. And the push is
Yeah.
kind of like especially like now we're sort of fighting for board control. That push is so important to be this tempo element that now you got to trade for a knight token. So you start on Crack and Clue, which is a sign of a little bit of weakness.
Yes. In this case, I think a lot of weakness.
But all you have is Caravan.
Yeah, which is
Not great.
pretty far from great. I think I have another Gideon in hand, but I'm not sure. They have the hand readers, but I play my cards close to the chest.
Yeah, I noticed that in all your features. I was like, I can never tell what's in your hand.
So yeah, I do have a fatal push, however.
Okay, and that's pretty good here. You kind of put the cultivator's caravan, which doesn't like quite conceal that you would have the fatal push, but it doesn't like put off alarm bells in Ken's head as much.
Right.
Okay. Here, Ken attacks your Gideon. You obviously just trade for this because you get allowed this sequence. And so this was interesting too, where I guess Ken doesn't know you have the push, so from his perspective, this attack is pretty safe. But I believe he has another ballista in hand.
Yeah, he does. I mean, he still doesn't lose his ballista, right? But it's going to be 3/3 anyways. But I just make him use his mana inefficiently was my plan. I felt pretty good about this exchange.
Yeah.
Obviously not amazing, but it's.
I mean, it's pretty good for you with this with the man lands, and now like your Gideon isn't super dead. I guess he's threatening to pump the ballista next turn, so you kind of are incentivized to plus the Gideon because of that.
Right. I mean, even like just the ballista attacking is annoying anyways. Of course, I couldn't kill the ballista there because then the Gideon just takes 2 from the ballista and dies. And I kind of at that point, I guess I didn't have the second Gideon. I do later draw another one, I think. But
so this struck me as an interesting play, which we'll see in a moment. Or just something I'm not even sure if it was wrong. Yeah. It's just like this is a hard spot to navigate because this is really where you have to like figure out what your role is this game, right? If you're trying to like grind them out and protect your Gideon, or if you're trying to beat them down. And so you choose, I believe, to go all in and even activate this caravan.
Yeah, I figured that basically at this point I can't really defend Gideon well enough. Like I don't have the resource to do that, right?
Well, you can do it with the. I guess you could do it with the Sham event, but he could also just have a removal spell because his mana's been pretty taxed.
Yeah, well, also I mean, just him making in his making a his ballista into a like 4/4 it's pretty tough to
Well,
deal with.
I was more saying like it might buy you another attack with the Gideon because you could just hold back the Shambling Vent, attack for 10 here. There's also like this is it's sort of interesting, right? Because so you're definitely just like going all out and you're saying I'm not going to grind with you. I'm going to let you kill my Gideon and then I'm going to try to chip you out. But you don't really have any way like to get through because he doesn't have to blow that many counters on the ballista to kill this. Like it kind of feels like you just kind of leave yourself dead in the water a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Like it is. My recollection of this match is that basically I didn't feel like I really could protect the Gideon. I mean, I can jump block. I could plus it attack and then jump block with Shambling Vent. But where does that get me to like the next turn? I don't actually get to. I don't think I actually get to attack for.
Well, you get in for 10. You still get in for 10 this turn.
Well, I mean the it's definitely possible that that the Toolcraft gets shot by the walking ballista, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's also kind of interesting that he didn't shoot the
Yeah.
craft because once you activate the Shambling Vent, you can't activate it on defense, and if he kills this, you have no way to crew the caravan, so he can still just kill you. So I kind of think it was also a mistake not to kill this because, like, if he takes you off 5 power here, you're only attacking for 7, and 9 is a very comfortable life total, I think. Kind of interesting.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting spot. I basically thought also with him having 3 cards in hand and me knowing basically that they're not lands because of how the early turns went, because he didn't play another tap land or a Aether Hub, that they're all spells.
Yeah.
And I'm on 2 lands in hand.
Yeah, and
So-
he was tapping it, like he was tapping out so aggressively and kind of spewed the push where it feels like he could definitely just have another removal spell, which he does end up having
Yeah.
a 2-piece interaction.
Yeah,
Kind of just a tough spot.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I was pretty far behind, but I thought if I push through a bunch of damage, it gives me outs to find things. Like for instance, my own walking ballista.
Yeah.
Which would just win the game here.
I guess I just sort of think that like the 2 damage is sort of inconsequential as opposed to the upside of having 5 more damage next turn, which I guess they would, because like then if they have a removal spell, they have to put their ballista to 1. You can like activate your thing, and then you have 2 1 toughness creatures, so it's kind of taxed. A little interesting. I think my intuition would have been to like just leave back the vent, but I definitely see the merit to attacking.
Yeah, no, it's
This
definitely interesting.
plays the ballista for 1, which screams removal spell.
Yeah. Oh, it sure does. And yeah, I mean, I guess I was expecting that like a grasp or something would happen to if I just held just the Shambling Vent back.
I did watch these videos beforehand.
Whereas I haven't watched them for a long time. Some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because actually, both these games you've chosen have been very, very painful ones. So Dennis won. At least I won the match. So it's
yeah.
That particular game was.
It's a little painful. It's tough though, because you only have a couple like arena feature matches, and they're just that invitational where the format was just horrible.
Yeah, I didn't know we were gonna do this. I would have saved my. In fact, just like literally a week before you messaged me saying you wanted to do this, to clear up space on my hard drive, I deleted all my MPL matches. So
damn. Yeah, no, I couldn't find those anywhere. I found like 1 or 2, and they were like
really
really bad.
No,
yeah.
well, I mean, we just all individually saved them. I had a sweet one against John Rolfe, actually. I think.
Darn, yeah.
So it's a nice one where arena disconnected and I lost.
Oh yeah, that does sound nice. Okay. This is just winding down. Kind of tough. There were definitely some interesting spots. I think the game was like honestly more interesting from Ken's side, where he just had a lot more options.
So he had a lot more options. It certainly felt like certainly the turn where he spent 4 mana on the attack on the ballista felt like a big win for me.
Yeah, definitely. At that point, I thought you were like almost ahead, but if you like just peeled a spell or something on that turn, but now it's...
I mean, the Toolcraft. I'm not the motorist was not a bad draw for me because it at least gave me this that scry too.
This is kind of a good draw too, where you have a bunch of creatures with this, and it lets you. Now the Shambling Vent attack's pretty good, but
yeah. Well, again, my only black source is this Spire Bluff, right? So other than the Shambling Vent, so I needed to draw an artifact to be able to activate the vent. So Ken only has one energy. So now he holds back.
And this Inspiring Vantage? What's the card called? Yeah, Needle Spires.
Yeah.
Spires is quite poor this game.
It is not. It does not face up well against walking ballistas. So.
Hey. Yeah, it's just like you have no way to prevent.
Yeah, I
them.
don't really have a good like to battle through all these ballistas, other than
Oh yeah, this was a play that struck me as weird because I thought, or I guess you wanna.
I want to have
You
the
can
black
block
mana
and then do this.
Yeah, I want to threat. I want to be able to block the long tusk cub.
Now that makes sense because you tap the Shambling Vent for another black to get this back after block.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now you're dead.
Yeah, and that was basically it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely some interesting things. Like, and part of the reason I chose that was just like the early land sequencing. I thought gave like a decent amount of information, which is good and cool.
Yeah.
So
no, I think people definitely underestimate what early land drops tell about something.
Definitely. So the last game we're gonna watch is you versus John Stern, old testing mate, right?
Yeah.
Playing in top 4 of Grand Prix Vancouver in 2014, where you are likely the best player in the world at this moment in time.
Maybe I think it might have been another year until I would consider myself the best, but I was up there at least at that point. I think, yeah, like the 2014, 2015 era was when I was the best compared to other people, at least.
And so this deck list gives me a lot of nostalgia because it's like right when I started playing Magic. Deck's great. Definitely a different time. 4 Azorius Guildgates hurts me a little bit to see, but
so there's a funny story about this deck list.
Okay.
So I was staying in a room with with 3 other guys for this GP, and one of my friends, this was before electronically submitted deck list was a thing, and I had a sleep-in special, so I gave my friend my paper deck list to hand in because he had no buys, so he was going in the morning. So then like I sleep in, and then like 8:45 or whatever, I get a phone call waking me up, and he's like, "Oh, dude, I'm so sorry, I lost your deck list."
Okay.
Like, what the hell? Like, decks are due right away, and I don't have my deck written down anywhere else. I just have it like sleeved up. So I don't have time to go out and like find exactly all the numbers and tell it to him. So I'm like, look, here's this article that Tomoharu Saito wrote about white. Submit that deck list. I'll change my deck to be that. He did, and then I won the tournament.
Wild. This deck is weird. That's good. You have 6 Flag Sources and these 3 Dark Betrayals in your board. A little ambitious, but
well, the thing is, you're only bringing those in the one particular matchup against against mono black, like control basically, where the games go really long. So having access to those in long games is valuable. Plus, you do see a lot of cards with this deck.
Yeah, and you're so good at using your mana, I guess. Like being able to 1 mana tempo go up a spell is really good.
Yeah, it's huge, especially like with Sphinx's Revelation. Being able to fire it off for 4 or something and have 1 mana open and have that find an answer.
Yeah.
It's huge. Yeah, it was very interesting the match of mono black versus blue white, because you both have a lot of card advantage, but in different ways. The blue white deck mainly leaning on Sphinx's Revelation, though Jace providing a little bit too, and the black deck mainly being Underworld Connections, but also Erebos sometimes.
Yeah, and so at this point, the format, this was right before Born of the Gods came out, I think, because they were like talking on the broadcast. They're like, what Born of the Gods cards are you excited for? At the end of this format, was it mostly just mono black versus blue white control? Versus
mono blue was also a deck that format. The format ended up being basically those 3 decks for a while, and then there were varieties of them, like black white, mono black, like with a white splash, mono black with a green splash were things. Mono blue, sometimes with a white splash, was a thing, and then blue white sometimes became Esper as well. And yeah, those are the main decks. There was also like green red or Jund monsters. There was burn deck, which I think Matt Sperling top 8 at a PT with, like a red white burn deck. There's some other decks, but definitely the big three were mono black, mono blue, and blue white.
You're playing.
Yeah.
Here you're playing against John on a standard looking mono black deck. And so let's get into the match. So
I'd want to, after this is game 2, I guess. After I'd want a marathon of a game 1. That game 1, I remember John was was pretty tired of it. And I was still at it though. It was really
definitely
slow
a wild
where I finally
game.
got with all of his stuff. I think I made multiple Elspeth emblems or something. And
I also love it. Randy Bueller calls you lucky on coverage like 10 times this match. It's so
oh
good.
yeah, great.
And
there's certainly some points where also I very much disagree with him on what the correct play
constitutes
is.
luck. Okay. So here, your opponent leads on, like, does this, so they lead on Mutavaults, they don't, like, was the common play pattern to Thoughtseize you earlier, or would they sandbag Thoughtseize for, like, spell turn?
It depends. I mean, here he decided to poke me for 2 with the Mutavault on turn 2, so leading with that on turn 1 makes sense in that context.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Often Thoughtseizing on a critical turn is better. I mean, I think after board also there's some other discard too potentially, but saving it for like to Thoughtseize and then play Underworld Connections is a pretty common play pattern.
Yeah.
So not seeing turn 1 Thoughtseize doesn't necessarily indicate that much because there's no hurry, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't have to. It's only if like he really wants to manage to stick something later.
I mean, I guess you know they don't have Pack Rat because they would have Pack Rat instead of Poke you, but that's pretty much all you know.
Yeah.
Getting zombie.
So Pack Rat just playing turn 2 Pack Rat is also risky because it can get like last breaths or something.
That's
I syncopate the zombie,
which tilts me because I wanted to see your hand.
So Mutavault turn 2 from me, I think, is more of a indicator of something than Mutavault from him.
Sense. Especially like, I mean, I guess Plains is a fine land, but you're not holding up Dissipate here. Like to note, it's like even if you didn't have the Dissipate, you'd want to bluff it if you could, and so I think that it is a decently strong indicator that you don't have another blue.
And then there's your favorite friend, the Guildgate.
Just Azorius Guildgate looking horrible as always.
No, it looks great. I finally have a second blue source.
Oh, okay.
I would have played it last turn if I had it, right? So it seems pretty clear that I've just drawn it.
So lucky.
And again, with Mutavault, while he can't kill it because he only has his own Mutavault to open.
Getting's good.
And it seems weird, like I'm a control deck getting in for damage and indicating that I don't have a counterspell here, but I know John is just going to jam whatever he has, right? That's or play Thoughtseize or Duress as he does now.
Yeah, there's not that much bluffing value.
But and because of Underworld Connections and Erebos, life total is actually very relevant for him, even though I'm not going to usually pressure him that much. Even just sometimes it's a card or 2 that I'm taking away with that 2 damage.
Yeah, like his life total is actually a resource,
Yes.
So here they duress you. Your hand is double Jace, Dissolve, Rev, and Sphere. So your hand's pretty stacked. So
here, obviously, I don't have any decisions, but depending on John's hand, he wants to take different cards, and depending on what he takes, I get a lot of information.
And most of the time, you really want to be able to, you want to be in a position where you're not far enough behind where you can just jam Jace because you want to hit land drops really bad.
Yeah, I really do want to just hit a bunch of lands because how this matchup, because there's so much discard on the other side, and I have such heavy hitters like Revelation, Elspeth, Jace. I want to just have a bunch of lands in play so that I can cast whatever I draw. And if I draw Sphinx's Revelation with 10 lands in play, the game's basically over.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much mandatory for you to cast Jace next turn, even though it dies to Mutavault. Like, you have to.
Yeah. Well, if I draw a land, I could potentially cast it and plus it instead of. But Hero's Downfall, of course, being is a card that John definitely still has in his deck, just unlike the ultimate prices and stuff that were in game 1.
I think D-Sphere is kind of the card that gives you the least information if he takes it, because it's sort of just like the default like good answer in his
Well,
hand that diversifies as opposed to like all the
it
like.
immediately with this pack rat gives me the pack rat
That's
gives
true.
me the
That does give
information
you some
why.
good
Yeah.
information. We agree.
But yeah, it's basically means that he wanted to resolve something before I can counter it, right? Because otherwise, dissipate could be the card that he would take.
Yeah. Also, he
But
knows
yeah,
like he knows that you really want to Jace next turn, so he knows that even if he didn't have, for example, pack rat here, if he just had another follow-up threat on the following turn, he knows you have to tap out for Jace. So
okay, so this is an interesting spot, I think.
yes.
So, well, he's about to make the split.
Uh-huh.
Randy Bueller, of course, first of all, suggests land plus Elspeth or whatever, because you don't want to give me 2 lands, right? But John disagrees and says Elspeth versus 2 lands.
And
So
so
now, okay, here I'll give you a little spoiler for making this decision. I've drawn a land.
yes, you've drawn a
So-
hollowed fountain.
Yeah. So what pile do you take and why?
It's close. So we know you have Rev in hand. Post board, what does John have? He has like a million Thoughtseize.
Yeah, he's got a bunch of
Oh,
thought
sorry,
freezes and stuff, but
Okay. Yeah, so he has 7 Thoughtseizes, but he doesn't likely have one.
yeah, he would have fired off something earlier if and also he's getting lower on cards and he kind of wants to use his cards for pack rat.
Yeah, I think because so from his perspective, he wants to use his like he kind of is forced to use his cards to put into pack rat in a lot of spots, and so for that reason, taking the Elspeth is attractive if you have the 5th land. The downside is definitely high, but the downside taking 2 lands is also kind of high against the pack rat. But I guess
Yeah,
like
one thing to think about. Remember, he has 2 Mutavaults, so you need to do some combat math as well.
oh, that's true. That's valid. So you're at 6. So like so you're at 16. So next turn, you're just taking a lot of damage.
Yeah, and I'm dying very quickly to these pack rats.
Okay, so next turn, let's say that he doesn't. It's pretty attractive for him to attack the Jace with the Mutavault because it's like a good exchange. So he attacks the Jace with the Mutavault, makes another rat, attacks you for 3. You're at 13. He has 2 rats. Then next turn he can like discard and make 2, which did 10. Yeah, you're just gonna like die if you.
If I take the lands, I just die if I don't if I brick once basically.
Well, you die if he has a land. He has to have like yeah. I mean, it's likely he has land.
It's basically it's incredibly likely if I take the 2 lands that I die.
Yeah, and Elspeth can save you.
Elspeth, I can draw into Verdict, I can draw into D-Sphere, and I can also draw into land to enable me to play Elspeth.
Yeah,
again.
it's definitely correct.
So,
Just take that.
so I definitely have to take the Elspeth. So basically, both John and I make the correct decision here, but the commentators think that we both made the wrong decision.
Valid.
And
you can also just Jace plus if you whiff.
Like well, Jason's gonna die, right?
Well, you have another Jace.
Yeah.
But you also can just rev. You probably die though.
Yeah.
Yep. So this makes sense.
Not only do I have to stay alive, but then like when I find my answer, there's still those 2 Mutavaults.
Yeah, the Mutavaults are huge.
Not die to those 2 Mutavaults afterwards.
Yeah. Because like in this, if you don't find a way out in this next turn cycle, you're going to be extremely low. So then if you find an out in the following turn cycle, you're probably still going to die.
Yeah. Of course, if I didn't have a land drop, then I probably do have to take both lands. But
yes,
hopefully I'd have drawn something. So John doesn't have a land, or he doesn't have an untapped land, the Scry land. And we have a lovely snowman pack rat. So as you say, I take 3 damage, and so then I do draw a land, a Mutavault, which is one of my better lands actually to draw here because it'll answer to his Mutavaults later.
Yeah, that's huge. If you find an answer to the rats, you can just trade lands and then be okay.
So you get to see the old school die technology that these dice, I'm using my own dice or whatever because there weren't feature match big dice that you can see.
Yeah, not great.
But anyways, so now I have the Elspeth, and so Randy Bueller's like, oh, what a luck sack. Well, actually, if I take in the 2 lands, I would just be dead right now.
Facts. Here was kind of like, I mean, the most important thing, like you're essentially forced into chumping the first rat because you're just not trying to take that much damage. But then I think that there is a question of whether or not you want to chump the second rat.
Yeah, this is again an interesting spot. So you can pause again. Like, how do I block? Right?
Yeah,
Obviously, if I take both rats, he can make both into 5/5s,
yeah, it's bad.
which is pretty bad because it then leaves him.
The mutavaults are gonna like be threatening, and yeah, I mean, I think that that's not an option. I think that the option is like, and you can't. There's also no good doubles or triples that work because of the mutavaults, as we said.
Yeah. So
So
it's block one or block both, basically, is the
yeah,
choice.
and so when I was watching this, my intuition is to block both, just to keep my life total high, and then if you draw the verdict, you don't have to be in as much fear of the mutavaults. Um, but the decision to block one and take the other makes it so that your stack blocking on subsequent turns is a little more scary. Where like if he wants to get in with these mutavaults to pump his pack rats and get in for more damage, then you can like maybe afford to double block a mutavault and then like chump 2 rats or something. So it's like a little bit complicated. Um,
Yeah, it's definitely complicated. I mean, one thing is that uh okay, that like rats are going to be bigger in subsequent turns, right? So
well, but you have chump blockers in subsequent turns. I guess he could have downfall, but
yeah, well, if he doesn't have downfall, I'm in pretty good shape, right?
yeah, that's true.
So I have to play as if he has downfall because
Yeah, and there's been no
otherwise
turn he
it's
can
pretty
downfall.
trivial.
Yeah,
So I have to think like rats are going to be bigger in subsequent turns, and also I want to force him. I kind of want by taking damage, I also force him to main phase a rat, which gives me a lot of potential options that are better. Like if I draw a verdict or a D sphere, I'm in way better shape if he's had to main phase a rat because he's down another card. Uh, and yeah, also again the rats are bigger on later turns, so having more creatures around to block is more valuable. For that reason, I decided to block with one.
yeah, I
And I think
wasn't.
it's a pretty important play.
Yeah,
I think like the margins here are close enough that I might end up losing this game if I blocked both one on each.
yeah,
But it's a close call. And in fact, actually, you can play the video now. Like it forcing John to discard a card puts him in a spot where he also has to make a decision now with less information compared to decision later about which card to discard.
yeah. I definitely like the one block mainly through downfall. I wasn't really thinking about that. Like how many downfalls were? He probably doesn't keep in all of them. Probably has some though.
Oh, I think he keeps in all of them.
Okay, then this is definitely just correct, but it definitely is interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Like
And the fact that like also he's not activating if he doesn't activate mutavaults because he has to cast downfall, then he he can only make one rat, and I don't actually take that much damage this turn, right? I only take 3. So
yeah, that's true.
whereas on later turns he gets to make rats and activate mutavaults.
Yeah, so it's just much more damage. Okay, so he
Start the
discards
duress,
duress, which he knows you have Rev in hand. Okay, so he does have the
yeah,
downfall.
and he's out of cards.
Yeah, so it's actually a huge decision. I
Yeah,
forgot that he actually had the downfall.
yeah,
Battle
no,
Blight was not released yet.
yeah. Bowblight was not out yet. Also, even if when Bowblight was released, I think it was not a card that you wanted to keep post board. Really, it was just happened to be useful pre board in this matchup.
So you drew a land, which is actually good.
Yeah,
Non-tap
that's
land.
great. And now I get to block 2 pack rats, and obviously he's going to do the maximum damage to me. But I get to
Yeah.
draw 5. I get to see 5 more cards to find an answer.
Yep. And gaining 4 is so crucial here because it's just like, if you're not dying from this attack and then you're gaining 4, you're definitely not dying to the Mutavault attacks next turn. So
Yeah,
definitely good. Yeah. John is kind of awkwardly 1 mana short of being able to activate the second Mutavault, but he can activate it like not attacking to still pump the rats, which is good.
yeah. So obviously I blocked 2 rats. I could be stupid and greedy and try and kill a Mutavault or whatever, but I just want to rev for 4.
I wonder, like, what if John just doesn't discard this duress? Right?
Yeah,
Like,
right. I mean, that's one of the things that it's like an interesting spot from him as well, like to keep the duress or not, right?
Because if he kills your Elspeth, then like you're kind of left on nothing, and he has these
Well,
rats.
I still have Jace and in hand, right? Which is
Yeah, but I
with
mean
him
the Rev
having
is so much more devastating.
it is, but remember he would not have this many rats, so it would be
Yeah, it's definitely weird.
different. Obviously, John here is just hoping that I didn't find an answer. I think again, this is probably where I get called lucky again by Randy.
Oh, he could
right?
he could have also someone in the chat said too. He could have just activated 2 Mutavaults and then duressed you, like not attacked,
Yeah,
but after blocks is kind of good.
yeah, that forces through more damage there, but again, not
But you don't have
the
the
rat.
rat for later.
Yeah, not and the rats really scale so much with having more. Like two
Yeah.
rats is not actually as scary
I mean,
because I
but it's just, but like the question is just, do you want another rat or do you want the rev? Like, I just think that
yeah,
the rev is like the way that you can, play as big as the rats.
definitely though the I only have to play. It's like a chicken egg thing that like I only have to play as big as the rats because there's three of them. If there's two
Oh,
rats, I can just play
but with,
Jace and like have blockers for all his creatures, right? Because I still have two blockers for his two rats.
but then he's gonna peel a card and he has the vaults. I don't know.
Yeah, but the peeling a card game is favors me by a huge amount, especially because I have Jason play and dissipate up, right? And he
Well,
didn't
but
know that I
maybe,
could draw.
but I think like even though you have Jason dissipate up, like at the end of the day, you still have to answer his rat eventually, and like rev is the only way for you to consistently answer his rat because you draw 4, right? Or 3, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of individual answers, and Jace digs pretty deep, right? Digs almost as deep as Rev.
Yeah, but I guess yeah.
One of the things also remember that I had just drawn runner lands or whatever, and I drew land number 7 to be able to rev for 4.
Yeah, land 7's
If
good.
if I didn't draw that, the rev is a lot worse.
Yeah, that's valid.
But again, yeah, like I in my opinion, I think it's a mistake to discard the duress, but I kind of one of the reasons I block with the one is to put him in that spot where he has to make that call.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think he did probably make the wrong call, and it was small, but I think I understand why he made the call he made, but it's
Yeah.
we're basically at the point in the game here where I'm at 8 life and he's got no pressure, and there's
Yeah, I mean now it's pretty much over.
yeah, this one is I mean it was already over really before this, but this is just actual over. He has 0 outs now.
Yep. Um, but yeah, definitely some interesting stuff.
Yeah,
but
really small stuff. I mean, a lot of it is like figuring out what cards you can draw to give yourself a chance to win games, right? And
one thing I noticed from watching all these features from like 2014, 2015 is just how different like the speed of the games are and just the like obviously the power level, right? Where we were talking about these mulligans. I think the
yeah,
mulligans are just, in my opinion, pretty clearly better nowadays. But I think that there is an argument to be had in terms of the gameplay. Like, was this sort of more your speed, and like were all these older formats the things you liked more, or do you kind of like the direction that the design is moving?
depends. I mean, all you showed 3 very different formats.
Yeah.
Like Avacyn restored, like Avacyn block constructed was not a great format.
Yeah, not great.
And I did not really like the Mardu vehicle format, but it was at least it was reasonable. I thought this format, besides the fact there's not that many decks that were like tier 1, was pretty good, and I thought the gameplay was really good. This format was much more my speed.
Mhm.
And later, I guess there was also like that Esper Dragon Abzan format, which I also liked. In I personally think the Vancouver Mulligan was like the sweet spot where mulligans were good.
You don't like
think,
the London Mall?
No, I think it's a big mistake.
What? I love. Wait, why do you like the London Mall?
Well, there's I mean a variety of reasons. I think that a lot of the problems that exist in Magic right now are caused by the London Mulligan. And there's a decrease in variety of gameplay, in my opinion. I think that mid-range decks tend to be improved a significant amount, and
But
a lot of
I mean,
people
I
like
think
that.
just like, you think the mid-range decks are disproportionately improving, because I think like
Well,
now
I think
Mulligan.
aggro improves too, but I don't think it's like in general, just the nut draws from everybody are improved. So decks that had high consistency but low power are just not really feasible anymore. You just it doesn't consistency is much less important because the London Mulligan provides that for you.
Well, but
You know,
I also think part of that is like it's also hard because we're talking about the London Mall and like design has moved in a very specific direction, and so I think that like they can be contributing to each other. Whereas I think if they designed like they just designed the interactive cards really poorly, like they're just not very good. Not they don't
right?
design them poorly, but they're just kind of weak. And so I think like it might be more of a case of that. If anything, like I think that these decks with the London Mall would have been great. For example, maybe they would have been different. I don't know.
Yeah, I think think there would have been a big difference. I mean, maybe, yeah. I think that I definitely don't like the direction that design has gone in a lot of ways. There's been huge amounts of power creep in the last few years, and it really just feels like if you stumble, you die. Which you can see from these games. Like people have, there's games where people stumble a little bit, and the game isn't just immediately over.
Yeah.
Uh, and I like that. I like generally playing long games where there's a lot of decisions, and tiny decisions can add up. Versus I cast Uro, you cast Uro, I bring back Uro, you bring back Uro, I kill your Uro, I attack with my Uro, and
Yeah.
or I mulligan to 5 so that I can have turn 1 Goose, turn 2 Oko.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder if like if they made the interaction a little bit better and the threats a little bit less, everything is like a howling mine that kills you, then it would be better.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean I think it's it's the fact that both exist at the same time that make me dislike London Mulligan. But one of the things is you can look at London Mulligan in older formats in some ways to get an idea of things. Though again, the new cards are so powerful that it's hard to fully eliminate them. But even like I top aided in London with Tron and with London Mulligan, and
yeah, that deck is pretty egregious with London Mull for sure.
yeah, it was so stupid. I mean, I had a Tron mirror where we both multi 4 or something, and we both had turn 3 Tron.
Yeah.
And I played turn 4 Ulamog, like on a multi 4. This, sure, it's like, oh, you had before when you'd mulligan to 4, you'd probably lose. But I also just wouldn't have multi 4. I would have kept a hand that could get Tron on turn 4.
Yeah, it might be a case of like it's specifically pretty bad in Modern, where like the threats are just so strong, and like assembling those combinations of cards is so good.
Right, but I think Magic has for many years now has been leading in a direction where the threats are much stronger than the answers, and I think mostly that's a healthier way for the game to be. I think really old school Magic where you're casting like Shiv and Worm or whatever, 6/6s for 6 or something are like above curve, and people are playing Terror and Swords of Plowshares is not great, but on the other hand, we're at a point where we're like to we're the exact opposite end of the spectrum, where it's like kill a creature that's 6 mana, versus like 3 mana you get a creature that draws you a card, and if you attack with it you win the game. And it's like it's too much when you just always find those broken cards with the London Mulligan, and you just always have your best draws. I enjoy the games of Magic that are a bit scrappier, where both people are kind of.
I guess I like it when there's high resource deck. I really like high resource Magic. Like I really like the fact that everyone just has 8 cards in their hand the whole time, especially when when the texture is increased with cards like Mystical Dispute and Aether Gust. Like these cards are a little bit too good in some other ways, but I think generally like if you have these cheap interaction with the threats, like I really like that you just have this grip all the time that you can just maneuver, and I feel like you have a lot more decisions. And I guess I wonder, do you think that the better player wins more in Magic now or back then?
Like when do you mean back when?
Let's
like,
say this era, sure.
This like the first time Scryland's around.
Yeah.
I think back then, I mean, one thing you can do is you can look at the ELO project and stuff and see when people had the highest win rates, and I think like the highest win rates were around in that era. Like I wasn't even number 1. I think I have like 2 on the top 10 or something. I think Brad has like the number 1 or 2 spots, and another high spot. I think both of Brad's best are above my 2. But when we're talking about standard, and so I think nowadays that like the cards do a lot of the lifting for you, and you just always have the good cards because of the London Mulligan. I like the London Mulligan's effect on mana, that you aren't mana screwed as much.
I'm so excited for this new mechanic in Zendikar. I'm so about it.
I'm excited for that, and that's what I like that type of way of smoothing things over more than the London Mulligan.
Yeah, because it's clunkier. You have to figure out a plan.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And just the London Mulligan tends, you like resource heavy Magic, but you're still exchanging resources, but it's just for cards that give you so many resources by themselves that other things don't matter. Like 2-for-1s in Magic don't matter that much anymore.
Yeah. Whereas before it was like, oh my god, a 2-for-1. Yeah.
Yeah, you go to 2-for-1. Like a card like Sphinx's Revelation, it doesn't really see any play in any of the older formats, even Pioneer, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's maybe people play one copy in their blue-white deck or something. Uh, Dig Through Time is much cheaper and finds you the specific cards. And really, Magic's becoming much more about specific cards than just like quantity of cards. And it's different. I mean, there's some things I like. In some ways, I've had more success in recent years since I've like sort of retired in some ways, at least.
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Like with London, Vancouver, Mulligan, I top eight with Tron, a deck that I don't think I'd never played before in my life, and I never thought that I would play. But then it's like, well, London Mulligan makes it too good not to play. And then recently, I guess with Teamer, and yeah, the Teamer Rec mirrors kind of were sort of closer to the type of Magic that I like to play.
Yeah, those mirrors were good. Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. Again, there's just some cards that you just can't beat.
Yeah, I guess I want to I want another year just because I feel like they've learned a lot from their like design mistakes. I think that a lot of like the issues with the like that were alluding to the London Mulligan are, I guess, I attribute to Uro and Oko and that all that garbage.
Yeah. I mean, maybe other thing like something like Once Upon a Time, right? Is a card that is doing something similar to the London Mulligan, and I feel like you can have that or London Mulligan, but not both.
Maybe.
Yeah. That's what man. Like part of the fun, I used to play chess and I play Magic. Part of the reason is that the games are different, right? And I just don't enjoy the games as much when they're all the same all the time, which I feel like the London Mulligan increases the chances of games always playing out the same way.
Yeah, that's true. I guess my argument was before like they didn't play out the same way enough. Like my ideal sweet spot would be the better player wins like 75% of the time instead of 65, So I guess like it's about balancing that to that point, but that's definitely interesting.
I mean, it also depends what players are playing against each other. Like if you have the best player in the world and the second best player in the world, should the best player win 75% of the time? Like they don't in chess, right? Magnus Carlsen doesn't beat Anand that much. They play like 30 games and he goes like 15.5 to 14.5.
Yeah, that's true.
So obviously, versus like you have the best player in the world playing against the 500th best, then they should have a high win rate. And I don't know that it's increased with London Mulligan.
It's also just weird, like, I don't know, data and Magic is also just weird now too. There's just like a lot of weird effects of just like even just deck lists being shared more, so I think people's decks are generally better, and then I think that the way that the MPL has worked has made like some people not care as much, so that like the players who then do care have really high win rates at the Pro Tours now, and that's weird. But just a lot of stuff like that.
Well, also the format being almost all the tournaments being just standard has been another thing. Like not having limited as a mix in.
Yeah, that's true. That I hate that.
Yeah, I just like that too. Also, formats like block constructed, like modern, but also and there's just having a more of a variety of formats is
to test different skills is cool. Yeah. Well, we finished all of our matches. I think we should wind the stream down, and yeah.
Cool.
I really, really appreciate having you on. I appreciate everyone for coming out. I appreciate Gab for the raid. Yeah, this was a good time. And do you have any closing words, Alex?
I don't know. I'm washed up now. I'm retired but still collecting my pension. So, but it's Magic nowadays. I think that a lot of the importance in Magic is being able to adjust to how the game changes, and the game's always changing. And a lot of the lessons and the ways that things like worked back then and the way you should approach playing things there is different than now. And you can see in a lot of these games people run out of cards in hand, right? That doesn't happen. Doesn't really happen anymore.
Rarely.
Like, there's only very few decks like actually run out of cards to play. It's almost all about turning the corner with something bigger that they can't deal with, right? Even like mono red and standard still just like usually has resources. It's just they're drawing into weaker cards than the mid-range decks are. So nowadays it's much more about fighting over the one thing that is going to take over the game, the one biggest threat. versus trying to run your opponent out of cards systematically.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a different world. But thanks everyone for watching, and hopefully I'll do another episode next week. Thanks again to Alex for coming out.
Well, my pleasure, Abe.
Yep.
And thanks everybody for watching.
Yep. Have a good night, everybody. Bye.